Okay, good morning, everybody. It is 10 o'clock and time for us to get started. I want to welcome you to our webinar this morning. I'm Betsy Hill, President of BrainWare Learning Company. We are recording today's session, so you can watch it again later or share it with a colleague who wasn't able to be here today. If you have questions as we go along, please type them into the chat window or the Q&A, either one, and we will have time to answer them later. We also, because this is a small group today, a fairly small group today, we may be able to open it up, open your microphone up. So we'll deal with that in just a little bit. You can download a copy of today's slides. I posted a link in the chat window, so you can see it there. Karen, who's on the call with me today also, if you can repost that maybe again, that would be great for those who have just joined us. If you requested a certificate of participation, we will be following up automatically for those who attended today, and you should expect to see that within a week or so. Okay, so I think we're ready to get started. Well, this webinar is a demonstration of BrainWare SAFARI. I do want to make sure we provide some context first. So I'm going to spend a little time talking about cognitive skills, what they are, and why they are so important. So in school, we talk a lot about making sure that kids learn the basics, and we use expressions like back to basics when we are talking about reading and math and arithmetic and writing. We don't always think about is that all of those, reading, math, writing, are actually very complex mental processes. Within or underneath reading and math and everything else we do are mental processes that we refer to as cognitive skills. So the learning process starts down at the very bottom, the base of this chart with what we call foundational cognitive skills. These are the basic ways that information gets into our brains from the outside world to start the learning process. And our brains, of course, develop in interaction with our environment. So these skills are critical. They include processes like attention, various visual and auditory processing skills, taking in information simultaneously, that's when you get the big picture, or keeping information sequential, keeping it in order as we're taking it in. Once information gets into our brains, then we need to manage it, and that's what the next tier of skills represents. These cognitive skills are called executive functions because they manage the other processes that are going on in their brain. There are three core executive functions: working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility. And these executive functions are highly predictive of everything above them on this chart. That includes academic achievement, how much money you're going to make in your lifetime, how healthy you will be as an adult, and whether or not you will end up in jail. Our education system assumes that students come to our classrooms with all of this cognitive infrastructure, all of these skills, all of this executive functioning, working well and efficiently. But of course, that isn't always the case. In fact, we all have cognitive strengths and weaknesses, and each brain is unique. For some students, these strengths and weaknesses can be real barriers to learning. Cognitive skills play a role, for example, in the learning capacity of students with ADHD, autism, learning disabilities, as well as all of us, actually. But for these kinds of students, it's going to be, there are some particular issues and barriers that they're going to need to overcome. There is a relationship between socioeconomic status and cognitive development. The cognitive demands of learning to read and do math are higher for English language learners. So in all of these spheres, the role of cognitive development has a real impact. And the good news is, of course, that we can strengthen these critical skills and help make learning easier. Let's just look a little deeper at the role that cognitive skills play in reading. Most educators, when I ask them what the basics of reading are, will say something like decoding and fluency and comprehension. And indeed, these are important skills. We cannot be good readers without them. But they are also not the most basic. So for example, there is no decoding part of our brain. Our brains actually have to build the connections to basically co-opt, that we repurpose parts of other systems that were evolved for language and vision and other things, and we have to connect them up in a new connection. Each brain has to build that for itself. And while we're doing that, by the way, we also have to be able to sustain our attention. If our brains go wandering off halfway through the word that we're decoding, we're going to have to start all over again. We lose track of what we're doing. Visual discrimination, quickly discriminating between a B and a P or an M and an N in fractions of a second. Sequential processing, keeping those letters and words in the right order as they're coming into our brain. And of course, auditory discrimination. We need to hear the differences between different sounds or phonemes that distinguish words. When it comes to fluency, other cognitive skills are going to come into play. Things like visual span, and we're going to take a look at that. We'll take a look at many of these when we get into BrainWare. Visual span meaning how much information you can take in a glance. Flexible attention, our ability to shift our focus and shift the skills and the processes we're using in our minds. So for example, when we go back and forth between decoding or sounding a word out and recognizing a sight word, those are two different pathways in our brain, that shifting back and forth is something that involves flexible attention. And then of course, processing speed is going to have an impact on our ability to build fluency. And finally, of course, in reading, what it's all about is comprehension. And here's where skills like visualization, working memory, and planning come into play. Planning in terms of, we have different ways that we can approach reading a text. We might be reading to get the general gist of something. We might be reading for a particular piece of information. We might be reading very deeply to understand all of the details and to remember everything that we're reading. So a variety of different ways that we can approach it. Visualization helps us create that image. It might be an image of a description of a landscape that we're reading, or it might be just visualizing the relationships among different characters or topics or other elements of what we're reading. And then working memory is where most of the work comes in terms of comprehension. You think about what happens when you're reading. You're taking in pieces of information, you're holding them in your mind while you think about them and relate them to what you already know, which is the essence of comprehension and creating meaning. And all of that happens in working memory. We don't have another area for conscious processing. The same principles apply in math. So we think about having good spatial perception, good ability to manage spatial information. Things like visualization, directionality, and spatial memory are certainly all going to come into play there. Even things as basic as counting require us to keep track of where we are in a sequence, so sequential processing, to keep track of where we are in a multi-step process, all the elements of a problem we might be able to be trying to solve. So working memory again comes into play. And then ultimately math is very logical, and so our ability to make inferences, to reason, to apply logic are going to be important. And of course, many of these are the same skills that we use in reading. We don't have two brains, we have one. We use it for everything we do. So not only are these skills the underpinning for learning to read and to do math, they're also foundational, as I said, for everything that we do. But one of the things that we don't often appreciate is their role in social and emotional learning. So what this chart does is it looks at the three executive functions we've been talking about: working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility. And it gives an example. First a short description and then gives an example of each of them. We've really already talked about the academic examples, but think about how you would apply those same skills in the context of a social interaction. So for example, if you're having a conversation with somebody and holding that person's point of view in mind, comparing and contrasting it to other points of view, considering alternative ways to respond, all of that is happening in working memory. Inhibitory control, of course, we have lots of examples, and this is the one that's probably the most intuitive and obvious in the context of a social relationship, where you don't punch your friend in the nose if you get mad at them, and you don't blow out the candles on the birthday cake, and you don't blurt out something that's going to be harmful or be painful to somebody else, and you disagree. You might find a little bit more tactful way to disagree with them, not that you shouldn't disagree, but, and also deferring gratification in the long term. Cognitive flexibility, looking at perspectives from different angles, being able to shift your point of view, being able to change direction based on new information, all going to be very important in social situations. And so there's a lot at stake in making sure our students have the strongest foundation of cognitive skills, because it's going to serve them both academically and with all kinds of other aspects of everyday life. And that's what BrainWare SAFARI is all about. It develops that pyramid of skills on that first chart, including attention and memory and visual and auditory processing, the integration of many of those skills called sensory integration and reasoning. It's very comprehensive, therefore, and develops skills in an integrated way, not in isolation, which is what many training programs do. In BrainWare SAFARI, all of these skills are worked on together in a very carefully crafted way. And we'll see more about that when we get into the program. It comes from decades of clinical experience. So it started with a couple of clinicians, a speech pathologist and a vision person, working together to share the best practices of each of their disciplines. And over the years, it grew to over 300 clinicians from multiple different disciplines, again, sharing best practices, trial and error, what worked, what was effective, what was really making the biggest difference for their clients who came to them with issues in cognitive processing and struggles in learning. And in some cases, in the situation where they were undergoing some cognitive rehabilitation after an injury. So over time, they refined and really codified this group of exercises that were very effective. But of course, they were very expensive because it was all very labor intensive and one-on-one, paper and pencil or cards and things like that. So what we did is we married it with video game technology. And then, of course, we did the work that we needed to do to make sure that it was producing the same kinds of results that could be seen in a clinic. Not for everybody, but for a lot of individuals, it can be very effective. So one of the big questions for any brain training or cognitive training program is what's required to get the benefit. And the recommended usage for BrainWare is 3 to 5 times a week, 30 to 45 minutes, over 10 to 14 weeks. And the reason for this is that this usage, when we see it, we consistently see then results and significant cognitive growth in our research. So again, this is the kind of growth that we see in our research because this is our original peer-reviewed published research on the program. The students here, 1st through 7th grades, although the program has been used with a variety of ages, as we saw on the previous slide, from 6 to 106, although I've never researched a 106-year-old, I have to say, but we're looking forward to it. So at any rate, the pre and the post test in this case was the Woodcock-Johnson cognitive battery, and then some of the tests of achievement. The students were assigned to a control group and a study group. The study group used BrainWare according to that protocol. And then after 12 weeks, both groups were tested again. The BrainWare group improved their cognitive ability over those 12 weeks by 4 years and 3 months. So it's as if your brain is now functioning at a level that's 4 years, over 4 years ahead of where you started. The control group, on the other hand, improved by about 4 months which is pretty much the amount of time that elapsed between the pre and the post test. So 4 months growth in 3 months is pretty much what you would expect. Now the 4-year growth is, of course, quite dramatic, but very consistent with what we've seen in other research. On the academic side, these were tests of reading fluency, math fluency, passage comprehension, following instructions, those kinds of things. And here we saw almost 2 years worth of growth compared to just a month for the control group. There's another piece of research that I want to share with you, and I can also just, if you are interested and want to look at the array of research that we have done over the years, all of that information is available on our website with brief summaries as well as the written reports. This study, and I believe that many of you are working with students with learning disabilities, so I wanted to share this particular research with you. Again, this was Woodcock-Johnson as a pre and the post test. The students were diagnosed as having specific learning disabilities, so by definition, there's a deficit in an underlying psychological or mental process. And because they had been diagnosed as SLD in their schools, they were receiving the standard reading and math interventions to which they were entitled because of their SLD diagnoses. What we're looking at here and how it's measured is on the basis of a relative proficiency index. And all that really means is that 90% is the score that would be expected of a normally developing student. And you can see here on the pre-test, the light blue bar and the light green bar, that these students were performing substantially below the level of a normally developing student, 63, 64% proficiency. And of course, that's exactly what we would expect because we know that these students have some issues in these areas. On the post-test, no difference really for on the cognitive test for the control group, as we would expect. They were receiving their reading and math interventions, but not a cognitive training program. The BrainWare group, on the other hand, performed on the post-test at 89% proficiency, so almost closing the gap to what would be considered normally developing. And then you can see the dramatic improvement that they experienced also in reading and in math. So rather than a few points and incremental growth that we typically see with students who have these struggles, they improved 0.8 of a grade equivalent in reading and a full grade equivalent improvement in math in just those 12 weeks. What the next chart shows is the impact across the various different areas of cognitive, the cognitive test in the Woodcock-Johnson. So we really can see a little bit more, at least as a group here, where those students were struggling the most. And you can see the very low scores in verbal working memory, short-term memory, their attention, also executive functions. And you can see that across the board, we're helping them improve their scores significantly to the level almost of, or sometimes even surpassing, but very close to or at the level of a normally developing student. So what Dr. Aston would say, because she has presented this research a number of times, is that not only can we help these students by giving them the kinds of accommodations and strategies and curriculum modifications that we traditionally provide for them, but we can actually help them remediate their underlying cognitive skills and help them learn like they're more typically developing classmates. So without further ado now, I wanted to get into the program a little bit and show you some of BrainWare. So what I need to do, get out of here for the moment. And all right, so I'm here in BrainWare. I'm going to go ahead and I left it at a place where I wasn't going to be interrupted by the sound. But I'm going to go back and we're going to hear a little bit of jungle sound in just a minute. If I turn my computer sound on, that's is, I will be able to hear it. All right. Hear those roaring lions? Okay. So this is the main screen within BrainWare SAFARI. And of course, it has the Safari theme. You're in a South American jungle here. And all of these areas that are highlighted now are the 20 different exercises in BrainWare. So we call them exercises because we know they come from serious clinical therapy and they're therapeutic techniques. But the kids, most people who use them will call them games, and that's fine. We want them to experience it as much like a game as possible. And each of the exercises develops a variety of different skills. So we can pretty much start anywhere. And I'm going to start with an exercise called Jumping Jaguar Flash. Now, you saw me choose a level there. Other users don't choose, no one else chooses their level. If you're using the program, everybody starts at level 1, just like in any video game, and then it gets progressively more challenging as we go along. I can't hand over the controls to you, but I hope everybody will play along and challenge your brains while you're doing this. Like all good training, we'll start off easy so we can get the feeling of success, but then I'm going to jump up after we do an easier level and show you what a more advanced level looks like so you can get an idea of the scope and level of challenge in the program. So this is called Jumping Jaguar Flash. There are instructions for each level that'll explain exactly what needs to be done. You can also click on this speaker button.
Level 1 starts with 3 boxes in a row.
So users who have an easier time with auditory information can listen to the instructions that way. Well, let's just go ahead and play, and I'll explain what we're doing here. When I click the Start Challenge button, numbers are going to appear in those boxes, and after they disappear, which is going to be pretty quickly, we have to pick out the box that was different. So 2 boxes will be the same, 1 box is going to be different. We just need to click on that box that's different. So hopefully everybody's paying really good attention right now so that you can see what's going on. All right, here we go. All right, hopefully you're playing along and that you agree with me that it's going to be the first box, which is different. And we got it right. We need to do this correctly 7 out of 10 times, so we would do it again at least 6 more times to get it right. And you can see on the upper right where it says W and L, that's for wins and losses, and that's how we keep track of how we're doing on the set of challenges and how close we're getting to passing to that next level. Now, I'm going to not just do that one again. What I'm going to do, as I promised, is jump up to a more advanced level, and we'll take a look at that.
It's okay.
So I think I'm going to go up to level 5 today. I guess I'm feeling ambitious. And again, what's going to happen is, well, we have 6 boxes this time. The process is the same. We're going to be identifying the box that is different from all of the others. So we don't need to read all the boxes. We just need to see that difference. And I can't honestly remember whether this is numbers or letters, but nonetheless, 1 box will be different. So everybody focus. Here we go. Okay, I think that was the bottom right-hand box. Okay. All right, just in case everybody had a little more challenge with that one, which I expect you did, let's try that again. Here we go. Oh boy, what do you think? Nope, I didn't get that one right. So now you see what happens when you get something wrong. It just tells you you got it wrong. And in this case, it shows you what was correct. So why do we care about numbers and letters popping up in boxes? What is that actually doing? So here it's working on this particular skill is called visual span. What it means is that we're trying to work with both our center vision and our peripheral vision and have them work together. So we read with our center vision, but we don't have time to read these. They flash up too quickly, so we can't really read them. All we can do is use our peripheral vision to detect those little differences. And I guess I need a little bit more work on mine today. So think about what's happening when we're reading. We're reading words with our center vision, but at a non-conscious level, we're seeing information outside of the range of center vision and taking it at a non-conscious level. The more we can use those together, the more information we can take in at a glance. That's going to help with a lot of things, in reading for sure, in terms of fluency and speed. But also think about this if you're in your car, think about it if you're on the soccer field, anywhere where we're trying to take in a bunch of information. That's going to be a way to do it. And of course, I like to show this one because it's a skill that you can't explain to somebody. I can't instruct you on how to see more information. But as we get progressively more challenging, we can train your brain to do that.
Too bad.
All right, let's do one of my very favorites, Bear Shuffle. And so I think we're just going to jump right into this. So what's going to happen is that the computer is going to give us 3 cards. Everybody playing along again, so keep your eyes on the cards and see what they are. So the computer is going to turn them up, 5 and 8 into 0. Now it turns them back over. And our job is to get them into numeric order from smallest to largest. So think about which card you would move, or cards that you would move. And if you are remembering what I'm remembering and holding on to that information, I'm going to grab that 0 and move it up to the beginning. And I think it should be 0, 5, 8 now. So let's see. All right, we did it. And again, we would need to do this 7 out of 10 times to be able to pass to the next level. And of course, you know what my next step is. I'm going to make it harder. So we're going to go up now to level 4. So as in when I showed you Jumping Jaguar Flash, if this looks quite a bit more challenging than the level I just showed you, it's because it is. But I've skipped over a few steps in between. So they do get progressively more challenging, and you work your way up to this level of challenge. So this time we're going to have 4 cards instead of 3. And after the computer turns them back over and we can't see the numbers, it's going to play a little trick on us that I call the shell game. It's going to switch 2 cards around, and then it's going to switch 2 more cards around, and we still have to get them into numeric order. So let's see if we can all track this together. 0, 8, 5, 3. Now, this is the computer moving them. Okay, I think this is a tough one. I think what I need to do is I need to move that last one here, and I think I need to move that first one all the way to the end. All right, what do you think? Do you think that might work? There we go. Oh, phew. Okay. Pat myself on the back on that one, because that was challenging. And if you found it was challenging also, I will tell you that this is the level at which just about every adult says to me, oh, I think I need this. Because we all have cognitive strengths and weaknesses, and some of this is difficult. If we take a look at the skills that are being developed here, this variety of different attention skills, sustained, selective, divided attention. We're, of course, working on sequential processing, keeping that information in the right order. Visualization, seeing that image even after it's not in front of us. Processing speed, some of our very, very short-term memory skills. Working memory, of course, we do a lot of working memory work in BrainWare, and then spatial and sequential memory. So a lot of stuff going on here. And the key to BrainWare is that these skills are developed not just in Bear Shuffle in this exercise, but in other exercises in different ways and in different combinations. And that's really sort of the secret sauce of BrainWare and why we get those skills working so well. All right, so you've seen that one.
Oh, well.
I want to do an exercise called web weaving, and I'm just going to jump right up to level 2 because I can explain level 1 as we're doing it. So I think we'll just go ahead and do it and then talk a little bit about what's going on here. So when I click Start Challenge this time, I'm going to get a little design on the spider web on the left-hand side, and then it's disappeared. If this were level 1, I would just go ahead and click the buttons to draw those lines to recreate the image that disappeared. But now, hopefully you can hear the clicking on my computer. And what I need to do is click to that beat 5 times before I draw the image. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I can go ahead and draw it. If I remember it, I think that's it. Okay, great. So what's going on there is that we are holding on to that visual information just a little bit longer than if we didn't have to, and executing that distracting activity of clicking to the beat. We also use the metronome in other exercises in the program, and one that's dedicated to clicking to the beat, which is helpful with attention skills and pacing and those kinds of things, timing and rhythm. But here we're using it as a distractor, and we're using it to help the mind hold on to information for a longer period of time. And really, this is what we ask kids to do in school all day long, every day. There's information on the blackboard, whiteboard, smartboard, whatever it happens to be. They might be copying down an assignment. They might be copying over a problem. And we assume that they can hold that information in their mind while something else happens. Someone drops a book on the floor, someone comes into class late, there's a speaker, an announcement that somebody's supposed to go to the office, whatever it happens to be. And we assume that they can hold on to that information. Much easier said than done. So an important skill that we use all the time.
That's okay. Relax. You'll do better.
So I want to do just one more exercise because this is the one that students will probably gravitate to. It tends to be one of the most fun, just straightforward fun and enjoyable. So the kids really love this one. And again, I'm going to show you a couple of different levels because we do some cool things here. So this is a maze exercise, and we have to plan our route. So here's my little llama, and I need to get my llama to the bridge, and so I need to plan my route. If I hit a wall along the way like this,
don't give up. Keep going.
I need to try again. So I can't hit a wall, and I also can't backtrack. So if I'm going along and I'm just driving my llama along and get up here and I go, oops, I made a mistake, I needed to turn.
Sorry, that one didn't.
Again, I'm going to have to start all over again. I have to just do it. I have to plan. I can't backtrack. I need to really know where I'm going. I need to control my mouse and really focus my attention, and then I'll get there. So that's great. And there are a couple of more mazes at this level as well, 3 mazes at each level. But I'm going to jump up again, because I can do that. And I'm going to go all the way to the most difficult level here. And I have seen students, and I'll show you how we track their progress, but try the levels at the upper levels of Jungle Labyrinth hundreds of times before they get it. And they're really strengthening those skills, they're repeating them. What we're doing in BrainWare is practicing, rehearsing those skills over and over again to the level that they become automatic. Our brains just can do them without conscious effort, and that's really what it's all about. So this is level 7 of Jungle Labyrinth, and what we're going to have here is my little llama again, but look at that. We have walls opening and closing. So if we think about the fact that we have to stop here and wait for the wall, that's a wonderful example of inhibitory control. We talked about that as one of the key core executive functions. And I have to wait for the wall to open, and then I have to go through here, and then hopefully I'll get all the way through this one. See, can I make this at once? Ooh, I did it. Okay, now we keep going, and I made it. I'm always glad when I do that because I always like to show this next one too. So this is a maze that has very nice tight maze, no opening walls or anything like that. But look what happens when I click my llama. The whole maze has disappeared and all I get is a little spotlight around where my llama is. So I actually have to learn this maze, and that may take many times. And that's such a tight corner. Okay, I did it. All right. Now I'm sure you're all dying to try this for yourselves. Hopefully you've challenged your brain a little bit while we were doing that. And if you are a school or a learning center, a clinician or something like that, we are happy to provide a 30-day trial account for you. So just type into the chat window if that's something you would like to do, or if, I know there are a couple of folks on who are already customers, so you already have your account, but if you need any help with that, obviously just let us know. But if you're not, then we would be happy to do that. So you can type that in the chat window, or you can just email me directly, and we'll take care of that. And I'll provide my email address in just a minute. So I'm going to get out of here. Then I'm going to go to quickly to the coach view. Should have had this up already, but okay, so this is what the coach view looks like. We talk about players and coaches rather than teachers and students, but the principle is the same in terms of displaying the information. So you can see all your players, how many levels they've completed, when they first and last logged in. And remember that if we're following the recommended usage, we're going to see 3 to 5 times a week for 12 weeks or so. We're going to see somewhere between 30 and 50 login days or sessions, and that's when we're going to be confident that we're going to see the results. Then we can click on the details link for any individual student, and we can see, dig down quite a bit more into how this student is doing. So what we have here is every level and every exercise and how many attempts the student has made. So this student has gotten to level 5 in Arrow Point Bridge and hasn't passed it yet. That's what that little red dot means. She's completely done with Bear Shuffle. Now she isn't very balanced in terms of the levels that she's passed, and that's something that we do recommend, that you try to stay reasonably balanced across all of the different exercises. But you can also start to see where the student is struggling. So Rhythm Ribbit is that metronome exercise, and that is pretty challenging for her. She has to do it a number of times. Jungle Labyrinth, you can see, was very challenging, and she did in fact do this level 5, 205 times, and hasn't passed it yet. So that's just really reinforces the degree to which students will engage and practice with it. Still needs a good coach, and it still needs encouragement, and it still needs all of that kind of thing. But the video game format does make all of that a little bit easier. All right. So just a couple things before we open it up for questions. I did want to provide some background if you're considering a cognitive training program, sort of the key things that you should be looking at. First of all, of course, is evidence that it works, where the methodology comes from. Is there research that shows the program improves cognitive skills? And is there research that shows that that translates to academic and real life performance? There are a variety of programs that show improvement in 1 or 2 cognitive skills, but where it doesn't necessarily start to show up in academics and, of course, in real life, and that's, of course, where we want to see it. Progressive challenge, I think that most of you probably have a good sense for that. Cross-training, that's the whole notion that we're developing multiple skills at the same time and not just in isolation, because these skills do need to work together. Feedback and coaching. One of the wonderful things that video game formats do is that they provide instantaneous feedback. They don't always provide coaching, and that kind of support that a teacher or a clinician or a parent can give can make a lot of difference in the benefit that a student or anybody gets from the program. Engagement, it has to be fun or people won't stick with it. And so that's certainly a consideration. And finally, any program should have a protocol to achieve a specific kind of a goal. If it's just a game, we can play it whenever we want, and we won't have to worry about how often or how long or how much energy we put into it. But if we're trying to use it for a specific purpose, as many people are, certainly as everybody who uses BrainWare is, then you want to understand what that is. I'm going to share with you, as I sort of wrap this up, 3 things that I know to be true about cognitive training in general, and BrainWare SAFARI in particular, that may not be common knowledge. First of all, our brains can change. This is a concept that's referred to as neuroplasticity. It's the essence of a growth mindset. We hear a lot about growth mindset, but we don't always recognize that that's not just believing or having faith, unfounded, that we're going to be able to learn to do something. It's really understanding that we can change our brains, we can change our intelligence, we can develop these skills, and that as we do, we're going to be able to do more things. Second, it's a decision about a 40-hour investment, pretty much. It may vary for some students. That's what that recommended usage adds up to. When we see students get that, we see dramatic gains. Third, schools and others who work with BrainWare SAFARI find that other interventions are subsequently more effective. So I have a colleague who loves the term force multiplier effect, but this really is. So you're going to see gains across and impact across the curriculum. You're going to see other interventions and other programs work even more effectively. And so just think about what teaching and learning would be like if every student came to the classroom better prepared to learn. All right, I want to open it up for questions. Karen, hopefully you've been keeping an eye on the chat window and the Q&A, because I have not. And
there's a couple good questions. Liz has one.
Okay, do you want to tell me what it is?
Do you find change in normal populations that do the program? That's the first one.
And the answer is absolutely yes. So we've used the program across a range of abilities. There are schools and districts that have used it with the entire school or the entire class. And we see an impact all the way across a spectrum of abilities. So it's been used with really very students who are significantly struggling, including in a school where the students in general had IQs in the 60 to 80 range. Of course, they're not going to make as much progress, but they still make significant progress, and it's obviously very challenging for them. At the other end of the scale, we have a school district that has used the program to help more students qualify for the gifted program, so up in that upper range. So we see it really across the board, and it's what we'd expect, because we know that we all have stronger and weaker areas. And so if you can take somebody from the 80th percentile to the 90th percentile, which would not be unusual, we see anything from 12 to 20 percentile point gains depending on different kinds of tests. That would not be surprising at all. Of course, we take that at any place on the spectrum of abilities. Other questions?
Liz had another one. Have you done parent-child-teacher post-treatment questionnaires that indicate their perception of any change or improvement And have you done any brain imaging pre and post?
Okay. Those are all great questions. So we have done questionnaires. And I think that would be a good thing that I should add to this presentation. But we have done parent and child questionnaires in a variety of different cases. And the kinds of observable changes that parents have are things like, you know, my child will come home from school and get right to work on their homework. They're more focused. They're willing to take on more challenging work. They can, you know, attend to a task in school better. Kids often talk about their memory. They say it's just easier to remember things. But of course, kids don't always perceive their own changes because it's so subjective, and it's when it's your brain, it's hard to sometimes remember what it was like before. We had one situation with a speech pathologist in a school who was working with a group of students, and one student, or the science teacher, came down and said, I have to see what's going on here because this student of mine, I got an A on the science test, and he's never gotten anything higher than a C or a D. And I know he did. I know for a fact he didn't cheat. So I just want to see what's going on and how he did it. So they sat down with that student and asked him what had changed. He said, "Well, not really, not much. Well, I took notes." Okay, so that was helpful that he took notes. And he said, also, Mr. Smith has slowed down when he talks. And of course, Mr. Smith, who had been teaching for 30 years, hadn't slowed down one whit. But the child's perception, he was able to keep up with it. And so it seemed to him like the teacher was talking at a slower pace. In terms of brain imaging, we have not. We're really interested in doing that. So if anybody has access to those kinds of resources and would be interested in helping us with that, we would be delighted to do that. We think it would be very exciting to see what we see. Any other questions?
No one else has typed anything in the chat window.
Okay. Well, we've reached our exactly, we're actually a couple minutes over, so I'm going to stop there. If anybody does have other questions, oh, go ahead.
There's one more quick one. Have you studied the effect of ADD meds on the program?
No, we have not. We really have not. There are students who have, there are a lot of ADHD students who have been in the populations. We've done a very small study with ADHD, but virtually every group that we work with in a school has kids with ADHD in those populations. Some are on meds, some aren't. You know, when we are talking with families, we really defer to the doctor and to the parents in making those decisions. So again, that's a bigger study and a more complicated one that we haven't really done yet. But I can tell you that we've had kids who have improved both on and off meds. So here's my contact information. If you have other questions, feel free to contact me. Feel free to contact Karen. Or anybody else that you may run across in the company. We're always happy to help with those questions. And again, if you haven't already had a chance to try BrainWare for yourself, we're delighted to provide a trial account for you to be able to do that. So just let us know. So we'll look forward to further conversations with you as we go along. Thank you very much for sharing some of your time with us today. We really appreciate it. And we hope you found this helpful and productive. And we'll hope to see you at another one of our webinars sometime soon. Have a great day.